a profound and urgent message, transcending common understanding, emerges from an experience that shook the very structures of perception. This is not a conjecture or human speculation, but a revelation so vivid and impactful that its essence still resonates with unparalleled intensity. The veil has been lifted, and a vision of the future, previously hidden, has been unveiled, forever altering the perspective on the events that are approaching. Two nations, pillars of global power and influence, which for ages were considered unshakable and indestructible, now stand on the brink of an abyss. The imminence of their fall is a harbinger of an impact that will reverberate across the entire globe, transforming the world landscape in unimaginable ways. Imagine a scenario where daily routine is abruptly interrupted by an unprecedented catastrophe. Entire cities, once vibrant and full of life, are swallowed by the waters. Mountains, symbols of solidity and permanence, tremble like leaves in the wind, and the very firmament seems to collapse, casting shadows over human existence. If history has recorded disasters of considerable magnitude, what is to come will make those events seem like mere summer breezes in comparison. The gravity of the situation is such that the central message, transmitted with crystal clarity, is a warning. This is only the prelude. What we will witness will be the beginning of a series of interconnected events, a domino effect that will lead the world to a decisive turning point. However, it is crucial to understand that your presence here at this moment is no accident. There is a greater purpose, a call to preparation and awakening. A simple yet powerful action is requested. Type the word alert in the comments. Each alert typed is not just a digital interaction. It is a spiritual cry, an echo that can resonate and awaken dormant consciences. Do not underestimate the power of your voice in this critical moment in history. Prepare yourself, for what will be shared next is not an unfounded theory or a fleeting rumor, but a direct vision of the destiny that awaits these two nations, revealed with unquestionable clarity. The first location that manifested in the vision was Florida. Guided by a superior force, the gaze turned to the southeast of the nation, and there was Florida, in its apparent tranquility. Initially, the scene was one of normality and serenity, with life flowing unhurriedly. The sun bathed the golden beaches, the waves gently caressed the sand, families enjoyed leisure moments, and tourists filled the streets with their carefree conversations. There was an atmosphere of joy and confidence, a false sense of invulnerability that permeated the land. However, that placidity was suddenly broken. An initial tremor, so subtle that many barely noticed it, was the harbinger of a drastic change. Some, confused, looked around, attributing the slight jolt to something insignificant. Nevertheless, in a matter of moments, the vibration intensified. Sidewalks began to crack, windows rattled, and laughter gave way to widespread panic. Buildings, once symbols of human engineering, swayed like fragile structures. Concrete cracked, columns bent, and amidst the deafening roar, screams of despair echoed, tearing at the soul. Streets opened into deep fissures, mercilessly swallowing vehicles and people. The ground, previously perceived as firm and secure, transformed into an implacable enemy. And then, a dense and supernatural silence settled, preceding something even more terrifying. The ocean, which for centuries remained constant and immutable, began to recede. The waters pulled back from the coast, revealing miles of the seabed. The population, astonished, rushed to witness the phenomenon, without understanding that it was the prelude to the final blow. On the horizon, a colossal wall of water emerged, a wave so high it seemed to touch the heavens. It advanced with relentless fury, and the roar of its waters resonated like trumpets of an imminent judgment. There was no refuge, no escape. In a few minutes, entire cities disappeared. Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Tampa were devoured, swallowed, erased from the face of the earth. The beauty that once attracted crowds transformed into submerged ruins. The scene was one of total devastation. Lives, dreams, monuments, all swept away by the indomitable force of that wave. The sea, which once offered recreation and abundance, became an instrument of judgment. And yet, even amidst this unimaginable destruction, the perception was clear. This was not the end. It was only the first act of a much greater judgment, a domino that, upon falling, would drag others with it. The heart, still trembling with what had been witnessed, knew that it was necessary to prepare, for there was more to be revealed. Thus, while the echoes of Florida's despair still reverberated, the vision was directed to the other side of the country. What followed was even more terrifying, for there, in the far west, flames began to erupt from the very earth. As the image of devastation in Florida still imprinted itself on the mind, the gaze was led to the far west of the nation. What was revealed there sent a chill down the soul. Flames began to sprout from the ground, as if the very gates of hell had opened. These were not ordinary fires. They were flames of supernatural intensity, spreading with astonishing speed, devouring everything in their path. Centuries-old forests, which for generations had been symbols of life and beauty, burned like giant torches, reduced to ashes in a few hours. The fire advanced uncontrollably, leaping from mountain to mountain and reaching entire neighborhoods. Cities that once pulsed with life were transformed into seas of fire, where the air became almost unbreathable and the skies were tinged with a sinister red. But it was not only fire that brought judgment. Suddenly, the earth began to tremble beneath the feet. It was not a simple earthquake, but something so violent that it seemed to want to split the continent in half. The ground twisted, opening into deep fissures, and the sound that was heard was like that of 1,000 thunders. The skyscrapers of Los Angeles and San Francisco, symbols of human pride and confidence in their own strength, trembled furiously until they collapsed like fragile sandcastles. Glass shattered in all directions. Entire structures crumbled, and dust covered the horizon like a mantle of darkness. The famous highways that connected the state, the pride of engineering, twisted as if they were simple toys in the hands of an invisible force. Cars were thrown into the air, buses overturned, and crowds ran in panic, with nowhere to flee. The chaos was absolute. The terrain offered no security. The sky brought ashes, and fire burned everywhere. When it seemed that nothing could surpass that devastation, a new scene unfolded. The Pacific coast began to fragment. Large portions of land broke off like plates slowly sliding into the ocean. What began as a slight movement transformed into a terrifying collapse. Entire neighborhoods sank before the eyes of their inhabitants. Houses, streets, families. Everything was swallowed by the waters. The sea advanced furiously, covering in minutes what had taken decades to build. These communities, full of history and dreams, disappeared without a trace, submerged in the depths. The cries of despair mingled with the roar of the sea and the crackling of flames. It was as if all creation was crying out in unison for the judgment that had arrived. The air was heavy with fear, and the sensation was that time had stopped to witness this terrible act. And as that vision was contemplated, a certainty dominated the soul. It was not a matter of chance, but the response of a superior force to the arrogance and indifference of a people who had strayed. It was known that it was not over yet, because something even greater was about to be revealed. At the climax of that terrifying vision, when fire and water consumed the earth and the clamor of the people mingled with the roar of creation, a voice resonated, louder than 1,000 storms. It was a sound that not only reached the ears, but penetrated the depths of the soul, shaking every fiber of being. "These states turned their backs on me," said the voice, with a tone of sorrow and authority. "They seek riches, pleasures, and idols, forgetting the one who gave them life and prosperity. Their sins rose before me like a foul odor, a heavy burden that can no longer be ignored. They closed their ears to my voice, but now they will hear the thunder of my judgment." The words poured out like living fire, taking one's breath away. However, amidst the announcement of condemnation, there was also a revelation of divine mercy. As destruction spread, small lights shone in the darkness. These were humble homes, where faith had not been abandoned, where hearts still remained faithful. Protective entities were positioned as guardians before those doors. Their presences were firm as walls, and no fire, no wave, no tremor could cross that invisible boundary. It was proof that, even amidst the most severe judgment, grace and protection do not abandon those who remain steadfast. Then, the vision expanded, as if the eyes were even more elevated. Beyond Florida and California, the calamities would not remain confined to these regions. They would move like an advancing shadow, spreading across the entire country. Distant states watched the news with horror, unable to believe what they saw. Some scoffed, trying to deny the undeniable. Others trembled with fear, paralyzed by uncertainty. But only a few understood the true meaning. It was not a simple natural disaster, but the movement of a superior force. It was like a line of dominoes falling one after another. Tremors appeared in places where they had never been recorded. The heart of the nation was being prepared to feel the weight of judgment, and every tremor was a call to conscience. The voice continued, firm as steel and at the same time, wounded by rejected love. I extended my hand for generations. I called for repentance, but my people preferred to turn to pride, to the flesh, to the deceptive glitter of the world. Now they will see that what they built without me will crumble before their eyes, but those who take refuge in me will be kept, for my mercy endures forever for those who seek me. As it was heard, tears fell from the eyes of many who finally understood the gravity of the situation. However, the vision also showed multitudes who were still spiritually asleep, ignoring the signs. With every word, it became clear that it was not just two states or even a single nation, but something that would expand like a circle of fire, reaching the entire world. And when the voice ceased, an unshakable certainty remained. The superior force had spoken. The time of mercy was still open, but the trumpets of judgment were already sounding. The weight of the revelation made it clear that judgment was not just destruction, but also a final call, a final breath of mercy extended to humanity before the door closed forever. The voice, still resonating, brought the certainty that there was a way out, but it demanded an immediate decision. Amidst the ruins and chaos, something grand would emerge, a revival like never before seen. Churches that for years had been empty and cold would begin to fill with broken people, crying out for mercy, where before there was silence and abandonment. Songs of worship would rise like incense before a divine presence. Miracles would happen in the most unexpected places. Hospitals where the sick would be healed before the incredulous eyes of doctors. Prisons where hardened hearts would surrender in tears. Streets where men and women would kneel, recognizing a superior presence. It was as if darkness itself was torn apart by the light of repentance and faith. But along with this vision of hope also came the urgency of a choice. It was not a call for superficial repentance, but for total surrender. Men and women at a spiritual crossroads, unable to remain neutral. There was no middle ground. Either they turned completely, surrendering their lives, their dreams, their plans, or they would be swept away by the wave of destruction advancing over the earth. To be light and salt in the midst of darkness became the most solemn call. Those who surrendered with all their heart would be raised as pillars of faith, bearers of hope amidst despair, lighthouses pointing the way to salvation while multitudes run aimlessly. And the urgency was as clear as midday sun. This was not a distant future or something reserved for future generations. The hands of the celestial clock were moving rapidly. Events would begin to unfold in a matter of months, perhaps weeks. The window of mercy was open, but for a short period of time. Every second that passed brought humanity closer to that day. The call was not for tomorrow, but for now. A cry from heaven. Today, if you hear my voice, do not harden your hearts. And when that certainty was etched, it became clear that the message was not just a warning, but a call to action. The decision of each soul, made in this brief period, will define its destiny. Thank you for watching this video. Leave your like and subscribe to the Living Hope channel on YouTube. Activate notifications by clicking on the bell to receive other publications.